Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Copper here. We're just doing a little discussion about the meaning of economics, or economics and meaning in our life, and the effect of the economy on meaning in our life. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, can't you take the background with this thug, cultural thug, explain that thing?
Yeah, let me say that. There's this guy, Cultural Thug, and he's attacking capitalism, saying that it doesn't have human meaning. Like when we bring a tractor to a farm and there's now 50 unemployed people, that we're missing some part of humanity there. We're just trying to automate everything, more profits everywhere, and we're missing out on the humanity side of it. Now, you're saying you want to be careful about that, and he has a point. And I'm saying that when we automated those people, now they used to didn't be productive. And now if they want to continue to take part in the dance of society, then they're going to have to set their mind to work, figuring out some way to be productive, some way they can benefit other people. And so a sophisticated, free economy puts a lot of pressure on people. Every day it puts pressure on people. Do something to benefit your fellow people. Even if you have to go educate yourself to do that. But you've got to figure out a way to benefit your fellow people.
Yes, I only have one sentence to that. Learn to code.
Right.
Tell that to someone with an IQ of 65 who has lost his job. And he's not able, he spent his entire life being able to learn a manual job. And then now he loses that job, loses the meaning of doing that. And it's very hard for him to learn something new.
Right. Now, I put to you farmers. In the 1890s, to be a farmer, you had to have X amount of knowledge. In the 1950s, to be a farmer, you had to know how to change the oil on your tractor and check out the bearings and the gaskets, things that their great-grandpa had no idea about. And today, to be a farmer, you had better know something about the internet and electronics, or else you're not going to be a good farmer. So we require knowledge in order to take part in society, don't we?
Yeah.
Now, the other option is a society that says you don't need to have knowledge. We've got a little place for you. You can just take your shovel and dig this hole, and that's okay.
Now, I'm not disputing any of that. I'm just saying that capitalism isn't the entire story. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't let the state do things. I think that this is part of philosophy where we're sort of aware, have our eyes and ears out, that there are people in society that have a low IQ and will have troubles learning things. And to try to have wariness of that and to create fertile ground for them to have something productive to do, I think that's a good thing to do. And in the long run, we benefit from that because we're not creating lots of very angry, low IQ people.
Well, I think that in a free economy, businessmen would do that. They would come up with, a businessman would look around and he'd say, I've got all these people and they're so dumb they can only do X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to have to build a system or a machine that allows these dumb people to accomplish the goal that I set them to, even though they can't really figure it out for themselves. And we see this a lot, that if you ever go get to Taco Bell and get some fast food, the people in there are dumb as rocks, and they are running a system that has been built by fairly high IQ people. So
I fully agree with that. And most of the tasks should be done by entrepreneurs. And in fact, we're talking too little about this. And one of the reasons, again, we don't talk about IQ. So everyone can become a rocket scientist if they just wish it, right? That's what they're told. If people were more aware of the fact that a significant portion of society can't do that, they would be more focused on developing technology to harness the power of low IQ people, right?
yeah, I think that there's a lot of that going on in America today.
A lot of it, but not as much as it could. It should be much more.
I've seen truck drivers that are able to move, 100 tons of freight just by pushing their foot down on the pedal and moving a gear shift with their hand. and they are dumb. Not all of them. I mean, some truckers are very smart. There's objectivist truckers, but there are some truckers that are so dumb that they have to have someone else back the truck up for them when they get to their destination. But nevertheless, they're able to move hundreds of tons of freight because people with a high IQ have built trucks with computerized systems and all these machines and stuff. So all around us, we see tools being put into the hands of people who could never make the tools themselves, and yet they're able to be productive with those tools. So I think this problem's largely solved in a free economy.
It's largely solved, but you have to think of it as a form of, in the extreme, you have to think of it as a form of handicap. We do like a world where there is handicap parking spaces, right?
True. So what's the parallel for that? If we didn't care about this, then the handicapped people would be making their way all the way across the parking lot to the front, to the storefront.
Yes. So the reason we like to have like when we're making sidewalks, we're making sure that there's a place where people with wheelchairs can get up and down from those. We're a little bit more considerate of how we design the world so that people of low ability is able to handle that world.
Now, what differences? I would say the best thing that we could do is to free the economy up so that these people can decide for themselves what to do, and other people can.
Of course, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that you have to be aware that there are people of low ability or handicapped people, so that you build handicap spaces for them, right?
Well,
parking spaces.
In what way do we become aware of this then, societally?
No, so I'm talking about as part of this is not part of state politics or something like that. But in terms of philosophy, you have charity in before the welfare state. There was a lot of charity, and charity is like that handicapped parking space. It picks up a lot of that part of reality where people can't really manage well as productive beings.
Yeah, it used to be if you were down on your luck, you would go to friends or family or the church down the street. But now your friends and family all shoo you away, and they say, "Go down to the welfare office. That's what the government's for. I'm not going to help you. You get help from the government."
So what I'm saying is a reply to cultural heritage is that we have an empty form of capitalism today to some degree because we have a welfare state. The welfare state has turned it into like a rotting corpse, taken away the human element of capitalism.
So
we've left the human element to the worst possible defender of that, which is the state.
So now we've got poor, lazy, low IQ people who are being taken care of by the state, and if the state weren't there, then what?
Well, then first of all, there would be communities around them, real people with real connections to them, who try to push them and nudge them towards good decisions. Right?
Yeah. Right now, your dad doesn't care whether or not you. He's just going to kick you out, and you're going to do your own thing. And if you can't do your own thing, you'll get on unemployment or welfare. And your dad just. But if there's no unemployment or welfare, you're going to end up living back with him. So he would care more about making a viable child if there wasn't all these safety nets around and everything was taken care of.
Or and an even more prudent example would be that you care about staying together as a family, so that the child doesn't grow up with a single mother.
Right, because single motherhood is very difficult if you don't have a welfare state around to provide it.
80% of all social ills in society comes from single parenthood.
Yeah.
Like, I'm talking about crime, child depression, out of wedlock births, all of these things.
Transgenders.
Delinquency, all of that, 80% of that comes from single parenthood. And you can just fix that with a nuclear family. That's not something that you have to that the government has to tell you what to do. right?
Well, it's something that the government tells you not to do with the welfare
Yes,
state.
that's true. But in addition to not telling, like if we want to remove the government out of that, it is good to have someone telling you what is the right thing to do, because there are stupid people, dumb people that just can't figure that out on their own, either whether they're unwise or they have a low IQ or whatever have it. People have to be told that.
Well, we're always going to have hobos, but if we took the welfare state away, then at least we would have the good, upstanding people in society showing other people through example how they can do it. But yeah, you're always going to have hobos. We're never going to get away from the fact that some people just aren't going to want to take part in society. Yeah, I think just allowing people the freedom to do as they please, even the poor dumb people, is going to be the best outcome for everybody. I don't see a way around it. Even though we are going to have like the Model T plant that started production, and all of a sudden they had to hire 40,000 people, and so a huge influx of people goes into that city, and then 5 years later they redesign the plant and fire half of them because they got new machinery, and now 1 million people have to move out of the city. I mean, that's not easy, but it's a hell of a lot easier than what Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia go through.
It is, and also just because something is hard, like we choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard, right?
Nice. Why does Brown University play Rice, or whatever it was? Do you remember that part of the speech?
I have vague recollections of it.
Okay.
I don't have the whole thing, but I do remember we choose to go to the moon and the other things, but not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Or hard, as I said. There's some truth to that. It's like, again, I come back to Jordan Peterson. He says, when God told, was it Abraham to get out of his father's basement, he ends up almost as a half slave in Egypt, and with lots of tragedy and troubles coming his way. So once he's like, okay, so that's what God had in store for him, kind of thing. So what he says, I never promised you a good life, but I could promise you adventure. That's sort of Jordan Peterson's take on that. Like adventure is with all that comes with it, pain and hard life. That's much better than dwelling in your father's basement playing World of Warcraft and masturbating.
Yeah. Because an action that leads to another action that leads to another action is more meaningful than an action that terminates. That's
right. Moral efficacy. So we didn't actually say that, but we can say that now in this video when we're talking about happiness. Moral efficacy means a good action leads to another good action. A good action leads to something good. And if you don't fundamentally reproduce, then you're stopping that chain of moral causation of something good leading to something good. Because when you're dying, and if you haven't reproduced, fundamentally you stop the chain of moral causation.
So we can literally say that good actions should not terminate.
And notice how this is that they are an end in themselves, right? Good actions leading to good actions is an end in itself.
So it's an end in itself to do X, which is a good thing, and then let's fill in the blank. Production. We produce something, food or shelter, and then through the use of the food or the shelter, we can move forward into the future where we can do it again.
Yes.
As opposed to actions which terminate, and that we have a word for actions which terminate: death.
party like it's 1999.
Yeah, it's all going to come to an end. Yeah, it's going to die and stop. So, literally, believing in life would mean having an integrated view of morality such that your actions continue. You wouldn't want to believe in life and your actions stop and die and everything ends. That's a contradiction to your actions.
Your individual life will terminate, but your actions can lead to further good actions, even when your body and your mind is gone.
And to concretize, we do mean having kids and raising them.
Or indirectly, in this exceptional case, you can sort of piggyback on other people's children, such as Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged for other people to read, other people's kids to read. And she can only do that because other people had kids. And her words will only have moral efficacy in the future because other people had kids.
Yeah, so it does require it ultimately. But there's also brilliant people who give their ideas. I mean, there's manufacturers and scientists and stuff, and they can rest easy dying knowing that some piece of them goes forward.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be their genes, right?
Right. And just to say, even if you do think sending your genes forward is important, they do get washed out pretty quick, just within a few generations. But you wanted to say, I think of that like humanity is the big mass behind, and your family is like taking a microscope and looking at one little section of it. And it's very meaningful. You are there and you are there. That's true. However, humanity is also in the background. You are on the surface of humanity. It's more meaningful to me to pass on my daughter knowing she's a copy of me. I realize 5 generations from now that my genetics is going to be washed out by having dozens of people come into the pool, but I'm passing on a copy of my personality in her too.
Yeah. What you just said here is the fallacy of, in the grand scheme of things, nothing matters.
Okay. But maybe it doesn't, but still it does matter to me.
No. What
here.
I mean, that's a fallacy, right?
Okay.
To say that in the grand scheme of things, nothing matters. Like, what does your life, individual life, mean? We're all going to die in 5 billion years anyway, because the sun is going to burn out and so forth. Those people who do that are very, very bad people who do this, because they're diminishing what is real right now with some fantasy of 5 billion years into the future. They're taking this godlike perspective to diminish life right here and now.
I used to be very, very tempted by that thought.
Many people are.
Until I realized that the stuff, even 1,000 years from now, the stuff 1 billion years from now and 1 trillion years from now has no relevance to my life today. Zero. Absolutely none. And so
it only has a relevance as sort of some dim background thing.
Well, in the sense that it can never have any effect on my life, it is just about as relevant as gremlins that wear green socks on the far side of the moon. It's just not relevant to my life.
What is, however, relevant to life is what happens right after your life and overlaps with your life. When you're creating your daughter, the ones that you're building a personal bond with, right? Passing that on to the future. So that is relevant to you. And what happens in 1,000 years, that's irrelevant. Because now you're taking the grand scheme of things view, and everything is irrelevant in the grand scheme of things.
Now, can we say ignorance is bliss?
Well, I like that in that sense, absolutely. But there was one thing you wanted me to say that I didn't say in the other video, that because I was using a naughty word, which was God, and a new intellectual think this is haram to use the word God. I'm being very nasty now. When Jordan Peterson uses God, the word God, he uses in the sense of eternity. So when I in that other video said you're when you're creating a life, a new life, that's the closest thing you will ever become to becoming God, right?
You're acting a little bit like God. You're taking part in eternity.
Yes. And in the Petersonian sense, you are then doing something godlike, which is to passing on this eternity. That God, in that sense, in the Petersonian sense, lives in the realm of eternity.
Right.
But your relation to it is not in like, oh, I'm going to imagine what's going to happen in 20,000 years. That doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is that life right here now in front of you that you have created for the future.
Yeah, and if we don't worry a little bit more about what's happening tomorrow and less about 20,000 years from now, then there won't be anybody around in 20,000 years to do anything. So we need to worry about tomorrow and next year, not 20,000 years from now.
And I want to bring in here, notice how those who have no children worry most about far, far into the future, like global warming.
Yeah.
It's the childless people who are very, very concerned about global warming. But those who have actual children, those who are going to experience the future, those are not concerned about this screwing global warming because they're worried about their children right now.
Well,
so it is a form of replacement of children. Instead of having a cat, you have global warming, right?
You have something that you're worried about and that you've got some meaning. You've got to have some meaning to your actions.
Yes. And just see how that reproductive hunger strikes people without children. That's precisely it. And it's a sign that they're not living as man qua man. Because instead of having children, they're now having cats or worrying about global warming.
And they're talking about killing people and getting rid of people and eating human flesh and cannibalism.
Yes. Now, okay, so just to get back on the topic of capitalism, when you take away the responsibility, the meaning and the joy of helping others, and the joy of receiving help voluntarily from others, you're destroying something very important in human relations. We become dead inside as a society, so to speak. And that's what we have with modern capitalism today, which has been partially rotted from the inside with the welfare state, which takes away that dual joy of giving and receiving.
Now, this joy of giving and receiving you speak of, we can't really take part in that joy fully by walking up to some stranger on the street and handing him $5. That's less meaningful than giving it to our child, for example.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously. So it would have been a horrible, evil thing to give $5 to a complete stranger rather than to feed your child.
Yeah. But we can see these people who have no children are obsessed with the state finding homeless people and giving them $5.
Yes, precisely.
Because they want to have some meaning. They want to take part in humanity.
So before you start taking care of other people's kids, you should perhaps take care of your own, right?
Yeah. And have your own.
And have your own kids before you start caring for the children that other people have. But okay, so the point is that this the charity, as Ayn Rand pointed out, is surplus activity. It's giving of what you have left, spillover of leading a flourishing life.
Which is why we don't have massive charity in pre-industrial societies, because they had nothing left. They were subsistence. Nowadays we have billions and billions in charity. We do all kinds of things with charity nowadays. All of the libraries were built with charitable money.
Notice here that the strange paradox that in capitalism you have the least amount of people who need charity and the most amount of people who can give charity. That is a paradox, and it's a wonderful thing about capitalism. It's that you only have the abundance to give for charity in a capitalist society. In a socialist society, you have a lot of people who really need help, and but less to give. So that's a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah.
Turning people into sacrificial animals, moral sacrifice, moral cannibalism.
And then killing them off as a way to do good once you've started the situation.
Yes.
Look.
So capitalism is just a system in place, like laissez-faire capitalism. It's just a system in place to create fertile ground for living an optimal life as a human being. And that creates the abundance needed to take care of those who need things. And it creates this wonderful relationship of those who have abundance to give from gets the joy of giving, and those who really have a need, they get the joy of being grateful for someone taking care of them in a situation where they really needed it.
See,
I notice that this is not about giving money. That's the materialist view. I just ran into a guy the other day in school who remembered me for after, like, he had an exam, and he was really pissed off about his teacher who was like not doing a very good job, and he was like, he felt that it was a very unfair situation. And I just talked to him for an hour. I had a good conversation about it, being understanding about this. And to this day, he keeps on remembering this as a very joyful thing happening in his life. I was happy at the time that I could help him with that, and I had an interesting conversation with him. I wasn't sacrificing myself. I had time to kill. And he was now feeling the gratitude of someone reaching out a hand in a time of need, that now he could find life a little bit more bearable. And he was able to get through this. And he's not, whenever he meets me, he's very grateful to me for that. I didn't give him a single dime. I give him an hour of my life.
right. Friendship or time or knowledge is...
And it's not that I gave him and sat there in pain and sacrifice. I was having a joyful time.
You enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, I saw that I was being... I was creating value there. I could see that he was coming from a little miffed state to being in a more uplifted state, and that pleased my eyes.
And made you feel good about the knowledge and your efficacy.
Yeah. Moral efficacy, yeah. Good actions producing good outcome, right?
Yeah.
And I took joy in seeing that good. Even though he was the one who took most of the good with him, I still took pleasure in creating that good.
Yeah. Like in Atlas Shrugged, Hank Rearden says something about moving a matchstick for an ant. Very easy to do for you, and yet it's a meaning of the world meaning for the ant.
Mm.
All right, so what did we start this on? Happiness, the meaning in the economy?
No. We started it on capitalism. And the meaninglessness of it with this cultural thug or something like that?
Cultured thug.
Cultured thug, yeah.
He's been removed from YouTube, so you have to find him elsewhere, but he's still around.
Okay. I don't care who that guy is, but he does make a point that it should be addressed. I mean, if we don't talk about it, other people who knows nothing about capitalism or morality are going to talk about it. So it's better that someone who can answer it in a good way.
I've given a pretty rough answer, though. I've said that in a free economy, these people will be better off. Don't worry.
Of course, but that's what I'm saying too. But there's a tinge to that there's an element of charity involved here, and so you just have to be on the outlook on that element. That there are options for you. If you are in a state of abundance, you have outlets for that abundance in the form of helping people in need.
Now, is the state going to be involved in that charity?
No. You don't have to have that.
So you think that we could have... you think that if we took the welfare state away, a capitalist economy would have some way to address the low IQ workers.
And not only that, it would do a much better job than the welfare state does.
Yeah, for sure.
Much, much better.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, what we're doing is that we're letting the worst kind of system with the lowest forms of intentions and incentives be at the helm of taking care of the low IQ people, of the low skill people.
Meaning that the intention is to never get them back to productive work.
You're not aligning the best in people in taking care of them. When you can align good incentives with good intentions, with good ability, and with good actions flowing from abundance, then you're going to get the best outcomes, right? But now we're just aligning a lot of bad things together.
Yeah.
And that produces a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, we're not producing moral efficacy in the people that we're helping.
No.
You should help
Absolutely.
people to be morally efficacious. You should not take away their ability to be morally efficacious.
In fact, if you take away their moral efficaciousness, then that is somehow a malicious action, right?
Which is why the Democrats are in the business of doing that.
Yes. So notice again, we're coming back to this idea that moral causation lies at the heart of what it means to be moral. You're doing moral actions that lead to good things. And if it doesn't lead to good new moral actions that leads to more good moral actions, then somehow there's a malicious element snuck into it.
A termination or a death.
Termination. So if you're taking the smothering mother, this Oedipus complex, the mother who doesn't want the child to move out, just takes care of the child forever and fills all its needs so that it never becomes a real human being. That's not good. It makes the mother feel good, but it's not morally good because it terminates good actions.
So, can we make a parallel between life, which continues, and moral action, which should continue?
Yes. Moral action should lead to new moral action. If not, it's not a self-sustaining process, and therefore it's not a good in itself.
It's a dead process.
Now, notice that she said that something should be good in itself. Ayn Rand said, right? What she meant about that in terms of this action, if an action is good in itself, it means that it leads to actions that leads to good actions, right? A cycle, a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
So a good moral action cannot terminate. It leads to more good moral action.
Well, I can only, my mind is asking me about suicide in a terrible situation, but that would be a terrible way to try to abstract a principle to live by.
Notice that is abnormal. It's not metaphysically normal,
right.
Not part of man qua man. This is why she talked about emergencies, right?
Yeah. Yep. So a moral action had ought to lead to more moral action.
Normally. Metaphysically, normally.
Yeah.
But there are exceptions.
Can we tie up that topic?
Yeah. Sounds good.
This video will be called Moral Actions Reproduce Themselves.
Yeah, okay, fine.
All right.
Finally.
There we go.
Fine, that's good.
All right.